House to Home, brought to you by RE/MAX Diamond Realty.
All right, everybody, we are talking about property, but we are going to teach you a little bit about business today because Liz and Gina are here from RE/MAX Diamond Realty, and we are talking about pricing and how you actually arrive at the dollar figure for a piece of property. So thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now, Liz, we'll start with you because you have talked to us many, many times on this segment about the appraisal value and when somebody that's legally and by means of training and certification is able to say, this is how much a property is worth. What if I'm a property owner and I say, I would like to make a certain amount, or I've made enhancements to my property. I've had, an extension put in, a second floor, circular stairs or a pool or whatever like that. I think it's worth something like that. How can we figure out the deal, the price that I would like to make?
So usually when we get calls from sellers, we of course do our inspection. We look at the property, we look at what improvements were made to the property. And the critical part too is looking at data. We don't just pull a figure out of the air and price your house. Now there are two values. Usually an owner has an idea of what the value should be. And then we look at actual data to determine what that value would be. So for example, if you owned a house in Kaiser or Nimitz Hill and you wanted to list your property, you had a price in mind, we would look at comparables. We would look at properties within the neighborhood that have sold within the past year. So we would look if there were 5 other houses that looked exactly like yours and they sold for X amount. So let's say they sold for $300,000, for example, and you wanted $400,000. We would look at the data and do some comparisons. So again, it might go up if you put in a concrete fence or did total landscaping. So those are factors within the values. But sometimes we get owners who are so insistent that their property is worth $400,000 when market value is only $300,000. So if we took that listing and we priced it at $400,000 and it sat on the market and no bites, then we haven't done our job. Now bear in mind, whenever we price the property, if we do get a buyer, they'll look at the property. Just remember the purchase contract will state it is subject to appraisal. So when we do our pricing, we always want to be as close to the appraisal as possible, because once you get a buyer, their purchase agreement will state it's subject to appraisal. So if the appraisal says $300 and our price is $400, even if they want that property, there are going to be some issues.
Now you were just mentioning the fact that a price might be set relative to other houses in the area, which would be regional or geographic. But Gina, here on Guam, is there such thing as like seasonal pricing for maybe like when a house or apartment building may have better exposure to the sun during certain months or something? Does that even bear?
No, that we don't. That's never taken into account.
Obviously, we've got summer and then the rainy season, and that's about it.
Yeah. Location's a factor. Improvements that the owner makes to the property is a factor. Some improvements are valued, some aren't, honestly. There are some improvements where we can take a look at the property and say, I know you made this improvement, but what you've done may not necessarily enhance the value for one reason or another. Now, you were mentioning improvements earlier, an owner's done a spiral staircase or a second floor. And here's the thing, as a property owner, how do you determine these values on your own? If you're not planning on working with the realtor, how do you figure that out on your own? And Liz and I have given advice. People have called us and we've given advice. This is what your market area is going for, but if we don't look at the property, then it's kind of like calling the doctor and saying, my side hurts.
Right. Well,
Can you tell me what I could go buy at the pharmacy to cure that?
I would think, because I'm naive to the whole process, I would say, so suppose I put a circular staircase between my first and second floors, right? It cost me $3,500 to do that, and I did that 2 years ago. So say $3,500 less $300 for depreciation or the impacts of aging and everything like that. I know it probably gets a little bit more complicated, the math does, than that, but is that like a fair way to?
It's a fair way, but it's not value for value. It's not cost for value.
Okay.
That's right.
Because so we're talking about appraisers, right? The way the appraisers look at it is in general and as an average, what would a buyer pay you if you added a swimming pool? Well, if you spent $30,000 for a pool, you're not going to get $30,000 worth of value. It's what an average, average consumers, what would they pay you? And some appraisers that I've spoken to have actually said, actually, we'd rate that negatively. We'd take away from the value because you have a pool. Because in my opinion, that's the other problem with appraisal values. It is really someone's, yes, they're professionals and they're certified in the field to look at properties that are comparable to yours, but it is their opinion. So it's based on what they felt was comparable to your home. Because unlike the US, we don't have cookie cutter houses, even though we have subdivisions. Everyone has gone in there, and my house in the subdivision doesn't look like anybody else's house.
Now, by no means is it unreasonable if you're a seller to say, this is what I'd like to make, but then we go to professionals like you guys and
That's
say, okay,
right.
and now let's figure out what the actual numbers are, and maybe we can start to negotiate and figure out something that we're comfortable with.
Right. I usually would, I would say, okay, here's what it's worth based on today's market. And just remember, value is a snapshot in time. So 6 months, within a 6-month window, 5 houses may have sold and it's valued at $300,000. And then the next 6 months, maybe 3 other houses have sold. And at that point, it's the average pricing is about $350,000. Let's say they're all about of equal condition and location. And then the snapshot changes. Then at that point, if we do our market analysis, it could be worth $350,000 at that point in time. So market changes and shifts. So it's up to you to get a good realtor to assist you in establishing a value and a true market value.
All right, well, thank you very much, both of you. Well, everybody, it's basically easy to say